rancher collapsed with his baby dying for milk, until a widow knocked and claimed them both. The wind moved slowly across the dry fields, lifting dust into the air like thin gray smoke. The ranch sat far from any town, far from any road where people passed by. But 'twas just a small house, a broken fence and land that once grew green but now looked tired and thirsty. Inside that quiet place lived a man named Elias Turner and his newborn baby, Vacation said. Elias had not slept well in days. His face looked older than his years, with dark shadows under his eyes and a heavy weight in his shoulders. He moved slowly, as if every step took more effort than the last. Since his wife had passed away during childbirth, the world had felt empty. The house that once held laughter and warm voices now only held the soft, weak cries of a hungry baby and the sound of the wind pushing against the walls. The baby lay wrapped in a thin blanket near the fireplace. Her small chest rose and fell, but her cries had grown softer. Elias knelt beside her, holding her tiny hand in his rough, tired fingers. He whispered her name, Lily, again and again, as if saying it could give him strength. But strength was something he no longer felt he had. The cows outside had not given much milk for days. The drought had made the land hard and dry, and the animals were weak. Elias had tried everything he could think of. He had walked miles to find water, traded tools for feed, and worked through the night. But nothing seemed to help. Each morning he woke up more tired than before, and each day Lily's cries became weaker. The house still held signs of the life Elias once had. A wooden table with 3 chairs, though now only one was used. A faded curtain his wife had sewn by hand. A small picture of the two of them smiling on their wedding day. Elias avoided looking at it because it reminded him of everything he had lost. He stood up and went to the kitchen, opening empty cabinets and jars that held nothing but air. He already knew what he would find, but he looked anyway. There was no milk, no bread, no food left that could help his baby. His hands trembled as he leaned against the counter. The room felt like it was closing in on him. Outside, the sun burned high in the sky, but inside the house, everything felt cold. Elias went back to Lily and lifted her gently. She was so light in his arms, lighter than she should be. He pressed his forehead to hers and closed his eyes. "I'm trying," he whispered. "But I promise I'm trying." But the truth was, he didn't know what to do anymore. He carried her to the rocking chair near the window and sat down. Breath. The chair creaked as it moved back and forth. He stared out at the land, remembering when it had been full of life. He remembered his wife standing in the field laughing as the wind played with her hair. He remembered planning their future, talking about raising their child on this land, teaching her how to ride a horse, how to care for animals, how to watch the stars at night. Now all of that felt like a dream that had faded too quickly. His arms grew heavy. His head leaned back against the chair. The long nights, the hard work, the worry, it all caught up to him at once. His eyes closed, and his body slowly slid forward. He didn't fall hard, but he fell enough to end up on his knees beside the chair, holding Lily close. The house went quiet except for the sound of the wind outside. Time passed, though Elias did not know how much. He felt like he was floating somewhere between sleep and waking. Then, faintly, he heard a sound that didn't belong to the ranch. A knock. At first, he thought it was part of a dream. No one ever came out this far. No one even knew he was here anymore. But the knock came again, louder this time. His eyes opened slowly. His body felt weak as he pushed himself up from the floor. He placed Lily back in the chair and stumbled toward the door. But his hand rested on the handle, and for a moment he just stood there, unsure of what he would find on the other side. He opened the door. A woman stood there, holding a small basket in her hands. She wore a simple dress and a shawl around her shoulders. Her hair was tied back, and her face looked calm, but her eyes held something deeper, something like sadness mixed with kindness. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said softly. "My name is Margaret. I was passing through and felt like I should stop." Elias stared at her, confused and tired. His mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Margaret's eyes moved past him, into the house, and then back to his face. Are you all right?" she asked. Elias took a step back, letting the door open wider. Best. Margaret saw the small, quiet baby in the chair. Her hand tightened around the basket. "I heard the wind," she said gently, "but I didn't hear a baby crying. That worried me." Elias swallowed. "She's hungry," he said. "I don't have anything left." Margaret didn't hesitate. She stepped inside and set the basket on the table. Inside were a bottle of fresh milk, a loaf of bread, and a few simple supplies. She moved quickly but calmly, as if she had done this many times before. She warmed the milk and carefully fed Lily. The baby's small hands moved, and her eyes slowly opened. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elias heard a stronger, healthier sound come from her. Not a cry, but a soft, satisfied breath. Elias sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. He didn't know why this woman had come, or how she had known, but he felt something he hadn't felt in days. Relief. Margaret looked at him across the room. "You don't have to explain," she said. "I can see you've been doing your best." Elias nodded, though tears slipped down his face. Outside, the wind kept moving across the dry land. But inside the small ranch house, something had changed. The silence that once felt heavy now felt softer, like it was waiting for something new to grow. Margaret stayed in the small ranch house long after the milk was finished, and Lily had fallen into a quiet, peaceful sleep. Sighed, the baby's tiny chest moved up and down in a slow, steady rhythm that Elias had not seen in days. He kept looking at her, as if afraid the moment would disappear if he blinked too long. Margaret washed the bottle at the sink using a little water from a jug she had brought with her. The sound of water splashing softly against the metal bowl filled the room. It was a simple sound, but it made the house feel less empty. Elias sat at the table, his hands wrapped around a cup of warm water Margaret had poured for him. He didn't remember the last time someone had done something so kind, without asking for anything in return. "You can rest," Margaret said gently, placing the bottle on a clean cloth to dry. "I can watch her for a while." Elias hesitated. He wasn't used to trusting anyone. Out here, he had learned to rely only on himself, but his body felt heavy, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. "I don't even know why you came," he said quietly. Margaret pulled a chair closer and sat down across from him. "Hey. Sometimes people feel a pull," she said, "a feeling that they are needed somewhere. Bay. I've learned to listen to it." Elias studied her face. There was something steady about her, something that didn't rush or push. She looked like someone who had seen hard times and found a way to keep going. "I lost my wife," Elias said after a long pause. The words felt strange in his mouth, like they didn't fully belong to him yet. But she didn't make it through the birth. Margaret's eyes softened. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry, she said. I lost my husband many years ago, Pierre. The room grew quiet again, but this time the silence felt shared, not lonely. Margaret stood and walked toward the window. She looked out at the land, the dry fields, the weak fence, the tired animals standing far off in the distance. This place has been through a lot, she said, but just like you. Elias followed her gaze. I don't know how much longer I can keep it going, he admitted. The land, the animals, the house. I can barely keep myself standing. Margaret turned back to him. You don't have to do everything alone, she said. He gave a small, tired smile. Out here, that's all I've ever done. Margaret walked back to the table and opened her basket again. She took out a small bundle of cloth and a few simple tools. I stop at farms and homes like this, she explained. I help where I can. Sometimes I stay a day. Sometimes a week. Elias frowned. Why? Margaret thought for a moment. Because once I needed someone to knock on my door, and no one did. Birds. Her words settled into the room like dust in sunlight. That night, Margaret insisted Elias lie down in the bedroom while she stayed near Lily. He didn't want to leave his daughter, but his legs felt weak when he stood. The bed felt too big and too empty, but the moment he lay down, sleep pulled him under. He dreamed of green fields, rain falling softly on the land, and his wife standing at the edge of the ranch, smiling at him. When he woke, the sky outside the window was pale with early morning light. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he heard Lily's soft sounds from the other room, rushed out and found Margaret holding the baby near the fire. She had wrapped Lily in a warmer blanket and was humming a quiet tune. You slept, she said with a small smile. I haven't done that in a long time, Elias replied. Margaret handed Lily to him. The baby felt warm and calm in his arms. She's strong, Margaret said. She just needed a little help to remind her. Elias swallowed, his throat tight. So did I, he admitted. They spent the morning working together. Margaret swept the floor, cleaned the small kitchen, and helped Elias carry water from a nearby well. Elias fixed a loose board on the fence while Margaret fed the chickens and checked on the cows. The ranch didn't change all at once, but small things began to look better. The house smelled like fresh bread. The table was clear. The floor didn't creak as loudly under their steps. As they worked, they talked. Elias told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about falling in love with his wife under the stars one summer night. Margaret told them about the town she used to live in, about her husband's laugh, and about the child she had lost whose name she still carried in her heart. By the afternoon, clouds began to gather in the sky. Despair. Elias looked up surprised. We haven't seen clouds like that in weeks. Margaret smiled. Maybe the land is ready to breathe again. The first drops of rain fell slowly, like the sky was testing the ground. Then more followed. Elias stood in the doorway, watching as the dry earth darkened and softened. He felt something inside him shift. That evening they sat at the table and ate together. It wasn't a big meal, but it felt like something important. But, like the beginning of something new, Elias cleared his throat. "You don't have to stay," he said. "I know you said you move on." Margaret looked at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in a small basket near the fire. "I don't make plans very far ahead," she said. "But for now, I think this is where I'm meant to be." Elias nodded. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He just let the moment be what it was. Later, as the fire burned low and the rain tapped softly against the roof, Elias sat in the rocking chair with Lily in his arms. Pateo. Margaret mended a tear in one of his old shirts nearby. The house no longer felt like a place of loss. It felt like a place that was learning how to live again. Morning light slowly filled the ranch house, moving across the floor and climbing the walls like a quiet visitor, bound. Elias woke up before the sun was fully up. For a moment, he lay still, listening. He heard the soft crackle of the fire in the other room, and the gentle sound of someone moving around the kitchen. It took him a second to remember that he was not alone anymore. He sat up and rubbed his face. The room still felt empty without his wife, but now there was something else in the air. Not happiness exactly, but something close to it, something like calm. When he stepped into the main room, Margaret was already awake. She was stirring a pot over the fire while Lily rested in a small basket nearby. The baby's eyes were open, and she kicked her tiny feet in the air as if greeting the new day. "Good morning," Margaret said, smiling. Elias nodded. "You're up early." Margaret laughed softly. "Old habits. I like to start the day before it starts me." Elias picked up Lily and held her close. She made a small sound, and he smiled without even thinking about it. The smile surprised him. It felt like it came from somewhere deep inside, a place he thought had gone quiet forever. They ate a simple breakfast together. Bread, warm water, and a little bit of milk, saved for Lily. It wasn't much, but it felt like enough. After they finished, Margaret tied a cloth around her hair. "Let's see what this place needs most today," she said. They stepped outside into the cool morning air. The rain from the night before had darkened the soil, and small puddles reflected the pale sky. Elias walked slowly across the land, pointing out the fence that still needed fixing and the animals that needed care. Margaret followed, listening carefully. Brace. They worked side by side. Psst. Elias hammered loose boards back into place while Margaret gathered fallen branches and cleared the path near the well. They didn't talk much at first. The work itself seemed to say enough. As the sun rose higher, Elias noticed something strange. He wasn't as tired as usual. His arms still ached and his back still hurt, but his steps felt lighter. He kept catching himself glancing over at Margaret, watching her move with quiet focus. At one point she stopped and wiped her hands on her dress. "You don't have to keep looking at me like that," she said with a small smile. Elias looked away quickly. "Sorry. I'm not used to having someone else here." Margaret nodded. "Neither am I." They shared a quiet laugh, and the sound felt good in the open air. Later that morning, a neighbor came riding down the dirt path. His name was Thomas, a man Elias had known for years. Thomas slowed his horse when he saw Margaret. "Well, this is new," Thomas said, tipping his hat. "Didn't expect to find company out here." Elias felt his face warm. "This is Margaret," he said. "She's helping out for a bit." Margaret smiled and nodded. Nice to meet you. Thomas looked from Margaret to Lily in Elias's arms. Good to see the little one looking stronger, he said. Word's been going around. Folks were worried about you, Elias. Elias frowned. Word? Thomas shrugged. Hard to keep things quiet out here. Someone said a widow showed up at your door and took you and the baby under her wing. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Is that what they're saying? Thomas chuckled. Something like that. After Thomas left, Elias shook his head. People talk too much. Margaret looked thoughtful. Sometimes talk brings help. Sometimes it brings trouble. That afternoon, a few more neighbors passed by. Some brought small gifts, a sack of grain, a jug of water, a piece of cloth for Lily. They didn't stay long, but they left behind something important. Connection. As the sun began to lower, Elias sat on the steps of the house, watching the sky change color. Margaret sat beside him, Lily sleeping between them in a basket. Resp, your life was very quiet before I came, wasn't it? Margaret asked gently. Elias nodded. Too quiet. Margaret took a deep breath. Mine was too loud. Too many memories. Too many empty rooms. They sat there, letting the evening settle around them. That night, Elias had a dream. He was standing in a field that was green and full of life. Lily was running ahead of him, laughing. Margaret stood nearby, smiling. His wife stood at the edge of the field, watching them all. When he woke, his heart felt heavy, but not in a painful way. It felt full. The days that followed began to blend together. Work in the morning. Shared meals. Quiet talks in the evening. Margaret taught Elias small things that made big differences. How to stretch their supplies. How to care for Lily in ways he hadn't known. How to rest without feeling guilty. Elias showed Margaret how to fix a fence, how to ride a horse, how to read the sky for signs of weather. Slowly, the ranch began to change, not just in how it looked, but in how it felt. One afternoon while Lily napped, Elias found Margaret standing near the old picture of him and his wife. He had forgotten it was still hanging on the wall. I hope it's okay, Margaret said quickly. I didn't mean to stare. Elias walked over and looked at the picture. He hadn't really looked at it in a long time. Russ. That's Anna, he said softly. She loved this place. She believed it could always come back, no matter how bad things got. Margaret nodded. She sounds like someone who believed in second chances. Elias swallowed. But pshh, she did. Margaret stepped back, giving him space. I don't want to replace what you lost, she said. I just want to help you carry it. Elias looked at her, surprised by the words. He had never thought about it that way. That evening, as the sun set, they heard laughter in the distance. Children from a nearby ranch were running along the path, chasing each other. The sound carried through the air, light and bright. Lily stirred in her basket, making a small sound. Elias picked her up and held her close. He looked at Margaret. Do you ever think about staying? He asked, his voice quiet. Margaret didn't answer right away. She watched the sky, the land, the house, the baby in his arms. I think about it more than I expected, she said finally. They didn't say anything else, but the space between them felt different. Not empty. Inspiration. Not heavy, just open. That night, as the stars came out one by one, Elias stood outside with Lily in his arms. Margaret stood beside him. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a dark road with no end. It felt like a path he could walk, step by step, with someone beside him and a small, growing life in his arms. The next morning began like many others, with soft light coming through the window and the quiet sounds of the ranch waking up. Birds called from the fence posts. The cows shifted in the field. Lily made small, gentle noises as she stretched in her basket. Elias watched her for a moment before getting up. He still felt tired, but it was a different kind of tired now. It wasn't heavy and hopeless. It felt like the tiredness that comes from doing something that matters. Margaret was already outside, hanging a few washed clothes on a line she had tied between two wooden posts. The breeze moved the fabric back and forth like slow, calm waves. "Morning," Elias said as he stepped out. "Morning," she replied. "I thought some fresh air would do these clothes some good." "And me, too." Elias nodded. He picked up a bucket and headed toward the well. As he walked, he noticed how the land looked a little better than it had before. The grass was still thin in places, but small green patches were starting to show through the dirt. It wasn't much, but it was something. As he pulled water from the well, he saw a cloud of dust rising on the road in the distance. A horse and wagon were coming toward the ranch. Elias squinted, trying to see who it was. When the wagon got closer, he recognized the man riding it. His name was Henry Cole. Henry was known in the nearby towns as someone who bought land. He had a clean coat, a polished wagon, and a way of smiling that never quite reached his eyes. Henry stopped near the fence and tipped his hat. "Good morning, Elias." "Looks like things are improving out here." Elias felt his shoulders tighten. "What do you want, Henry?" Henry chuckled lightly, straight to the point. "I like that. I heard you've had a rough time lately. Thought I'd come by and offer a little help." Margaret walked over, wiping her hands on her dress. She stood quietly beside Elias. Henry glanced at her, then back at Elias. "I'm looking to buy some land in this area. Good land. Bays. Yours sits in a fine spot, even if it's seen better days." Elias crossed his arms. "I'm not selling." Henry raised his hands in a calm gesture. "No harm in talking, is there? I can offer you a fair price, enough to take your baby somewhere comfortable. Somewhere with doctors, stores, and people around. Somewhere you won't have to struggle every day just to get by." The words hit Elias harder than he expected. He looked down at Lily in Margaret's arms. The idea of a place with more help, more safety, more chances for his daughter stirred something inside him. Margaret noticed the change in his face. She didn't speak, but her eyes stayed on him, steady and quiet. Henry leaned forward slightly. "Think about it. You've been fighting this land for a long time. Maybe it's time to let go and start fresh somewhere else." He pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it out. "Here's my offer. I'll come back in a few days."
Elias hesitated, then took the paper.
Henry nodded and turned his wagon around, leaving a trail of dust behind him. The ranch felt quiet again after Henry left. Elias stood there, staring at the paper in his hand. Margaret handed Lily back to him gently. "Was a big offer," Margaret said softly. Elias nodded. "It could change everything." They went back inside, but the feeling from the moment followed them like a shadow. All day, Elias found it hard to focus. He fixed a loose fence, but his mind wandered. He fed the animals, but his thoughts kept returning to Henry's words. A place with more help. A place where Lily might grow up with less worry. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Elias sat at the table with the paper spread in front of him. Margaret sat across from him, mending a small tear in one of Lily's blankets.
"You don't have to decide right away," she said. "I know," Elias replied.
"But it feels like one of those choices that changes everything." Margaret nodded. "It usually is." Elias ran a hand through his hair. "This land is all I've ever known. It's where I grew up. Best, where I built my life with Anna, where Lily was born, but it's also where everything fell apart." Margaret put down the blanket. "Sometimes places hold both our pain and our hope," she said. "Leaving doesn't always mean you're running away, bare. And staying doesn't always mean you're stuck." Elias looked at her. "What would you do?" Margaret thought for a moment. "I've spent a long time moving from place to place, thinking that if I kept walking, I wouldn't have to face what I lost. But everywhere I went, my memories came with me. What mattered wasn't where I was.
It was who I was willing to stand beside."
Elias looked down at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms. He felt her small breath against his chest. That night he had trouble sleeping. He got up and walked outside, standing under the wide, dark sky. Stars filled the space above him, just like they had on the night he had asked Anna to marry him. He remembered her laugh, her confidence, her belief in this land. Margaret stepped out quietly and stood beside him. "You can't see the future from here," she said gently, "but you can listen to what feels true in this moment." By you can cost his eyes. He listened to the wind, for the soft sounds of the animals, the steady breathing of his daughter inside the house. "I'm tired of running," he said. "Even when I don't move, it feels like I've been running from the pain, from the fear. This place hurts, but it also reminds me of what I loved." Margaret nodded. "Staying can be a kind of courage, too." The next day, neighbors stopped by again. They talked about the rain, the crops, the animals. Someone mentioned Henry's visit. "Word is he wants your land," one of them said. "You'd be smart to take the money." Elias smiled politely but didn't answer. Later he sat on the porch with Margaret, watching Lily wave her tiny hands in the air. "I think I have made my choice," Elias said quietly. Margaret turned to him. "What is it?" Elias looked at the fields, at the fence, at the house. "This place isn't perfect." "Neither am I. But this is where Lily's story began." "It's where mine began, too. I don't want to leave just because things got hard. Pray." Margaret smiled, not wide or loud, but warm. "Then I'll stand with you, as long as you'll have me." Elias met her eyes. "I would." A few days later, Henry returned. Elias met him at the fence. "I've thought about your offer," Elias said. "I appreciate it. But I'm not selling." Henry studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Your choice. Land like this has a way of testing people. I hope you're ready for it." As Henry rode away, Elias felt a strange mix of fear and peace. He didn't know what the future held. He knew only that he had chosen to face it, not escape it. That evening, the three of them sat together in the warm glow of the fire. Lily slept between Elias and Margaret, safe and calm. The ranch still had problems. The land still needed care. Life was still uncertain. But now, Elias didn't feel like he was standing alone in the middle of it all. The days after Elias turned down Henry's offer felt different, even though the ranch itself looked the same. The fence still leaned in places. The fields still needed care. The house still had marks of old memories and quiet corners that held sadness. But something inside Elias had shifted. He woke up each morning with a reason that felt stronger than fear. Margaret noticed it too. He moved with more purpose now. He talked more. He smiled more even when things went wrong. And things still went wrong sometimes. Ah! One morning, a strong wind knocked over part of the fence near the far field. Elias and Margaret worked together to fix it, passing boards and tools back and forth. Lily lay nearby in a small basket, watching them with wide, curious eyes. When they finished, Elias wiped his forehead and laughed. I think this fence likes falling over just to keep us busy. Margaret laughed with him. Maybe it just wants attention. They sat down on the grass, tired but content. Lily made a small sound, and Elias picked her up, lifting her into the air gently. Her face lit up, and she kicked her legs with excitement. Margaret watched them, her smile soft and thoughtful. That afternoon, clouds gathered again, but this time, the rain didn't feel like a surprise. It felt welcome. Elias stood in the doorway, holding Lily, as the first drops fell. "Looks like the land is listening," he said. Margaret stepped beside him. "So are you." The rain brought new life to the fields. Over the next few weeks, small green shoots began to rise from the ground. The cows grew stronger. The air felt fresher. It wasn't a miracle, but it was progress. Neighbors started coming by more often, not just to check in, but to help. One brought extra seeds. Another offered to repair part of the roof. Someone else helped Elias fix an old wagon that hadn't worked in years. The ranch slowly became a place where people stopped, talked, and shared stories. Laughter began to mix with the sounds of animals and wind. One evening, as the sun set in soft colors of orange and pink, Elias and Margaret sat on the porch. Lily rested between them, wrapped in a warm blanket.
"Do you ever miss the road?" Elias asked.
Bah! Margaret thought for a moment. Sometimes. But I think I was walking to avoid standing still. Here, I feel like I'm finally standing somewhere that matters. Elias nodded. I used to think this place was just a reminder of what I lost. Now it feels like a place for what I can build. Margaret looked at him. You've built more than a ranch. You've built a home. Elias felt a quiet warmth at her words. That night he dreamed again. But this time, the dream felt different. He saw the ranch full of life, breath. He saw Lily running through the fields, older now, laughing. He saw Margaret standing nearby calling out to her. And he saw himself, not tired and broken, but steady and strong. When he woke, he felt ready for whatever the day would bring. Weeks turned into months. Lily grew stronger and more curious. She learned to sit up, then to crawl. Her laughter became a sound that filled the house and spilled out into the fields. Margaret taught her simple songs. Elias taught her the names of animals and plants. Even though she was too young to understand, he spoke to her as if she did. "This is your home," he would say. "This is where you belong."
One day, a letter arrived from a town not too far away. It offered Elias a chance to sell some of his crops at a small market.
It wasn't a big opportunity, but it was a start. Elias and Margaret prepared together. They loaded the wagon with what they had grown and made the trip into town with Lily wrapped safely between them. People at the market stopped to talk. Some recognized Elias. Some met Margaret for the first time. They sold their goods, but more importantly, they made connections, promises of future trades. Invitations to visit! On the way back, Elias felt lighter than he had in years. "This feels like the world opening up again," he said. Margaret smiled. It never really closed. You just had to be ready to step into it. As time went on, Elias began to notice something else changing. But the way he and Margaret moved around each other, the way they shared quiet moments without needing to speak, the way they both reached for Lily at the same time, then laughed about it. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Elias and Margaret sat by the fire. "I've been thinking," Elias said slowly, "about what you said a long time ago. About not replacing what was lost, but helping to carry it." Margaret looked at him, listening. "I don't think I'm carrying it alone anymore," he continued. "I think we're carrying it together." Margaret's eyes filled with emotion, but she smiled. "I feel the same." They didn't rush anything. They didn't make big promises or dramatic plans. They just let the moment be honest and quiet and real. Spring came, and with it, flowers in the fields. The ranch looked more alive than it had in years. The fence stood strong. The animals were healthy. The house felt warm and full. Neighbors began to joke that the ranch had been claimed by kindness. Elias would laugh and shake his head, but inside he knew there was some truth to it. One afternoon, as Lily took her first unsteady steps across the floor, Elias and Margaret watched, holding their breath. She wobbled, then fell, then laughed. Elias picked her up, his heart full. "You're braver than I ever was," he told her. Margaret placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've been brave in your own way." As the sun set that evening, Elias stood in the field with Lily in his arms and Margaret by his side. The sky stretched wide and open above them. "This place almost broke me," Elias said quietly, "but it also brought me back." Margaret nodded. "Sometimes what breaks us is also what shapes us." Elias looked at Lily's small face, at Margaret's steady presence, at the land that now felt like more than just dirt and fences and walls. "It's not perfect," he said. Margaret smiled. "Neither is any real home." The wind moved gently through the grass. The animals settled for the night. The house glowed with warm light behind them. Elias felt something he hadn't felt since before everything had fallen apart. Peace. Not because life was easy. Not because every problem was solved, but because he was no longer facing the world alone. The ranch, once silent and tired, now held the sound of a child's laughter, the warmth of shared work, and the quiet promise of a future built on care, patience, and hope.